Today, presented by Sean Ponda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. Good day, and welcome in, everybody. It's good to be here. It's good to be here on a Friday, making sure all our buttons work. But here we go, Mace. We're on a mess around Friday. We'll try to be nice. I know OBT is a BFD, so there I just said F. So F around Friday, I guess. If I get in trouble, so be it. What happened to
I
Cecil?
said fart around Friday. That's what we should do. Just fart.
Actually,
Fart.
I know we're not on air, but on air via the FCC, you're not actually supposed to talk about even farting or burping. No sort of bodily functions whatsoever. So I've been trained of 20 years in radio of not talking about bodily functions.
You can't talk about farting or burping on air.
I believe that's the case. Ask Howard Stern, who made a career of it.
Was he getting fined when he was talking about farting?
Yeah, yes.
So every time he referenced Fart Man, he got fined?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's right.
Fuddy-duddies, man. I mean, that's, I get that there has to be a line, but I always thought that farting was on the right side of the line. It's a natural function. It's not good to hold it in. That's the thing. Like, it's not good to hold in the gas. You're better off, maybe not better off for everyone else, but you're better off for your own gastrointestinal health, just letting it flow.
Let it go, man. Just let it go. It was me. I think that's Liar Liar when he farts in the elevator, right?
Yeah, it was the one who smelt it, dealt it.
Skunk smells his own hole first.
The other thing is also whoever makes the rhyme did the crime. That was something my daughter taught me a few weeks ago.
Okay.
That they say in school. He who did the rhyme did the crime.
Did the crime. All right, I like it. Nothing but crime in here, and it's dangerous to keep it in when we've got all this Broncos opinions and knowledge to talk about. It is Orange Blue Today, presented by Sean Ponda, a special Friday edition. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, and I wrote it. I teased it, Mace. On this show, I teased it. I'm writing about Adam Trautman. And so I did. And looking back at it, we can talk about what he was at Dayton. We can talk about when we saw him at the Senior Bowl. That was pre-pandemic because it was 2020.
Yes.
So it was like right before all that hell broke loose. But anyway, so like you and I are well-versed to talk about Adam Trautman, and I think the Broncos have their starting tight end. It's not Greg Dulcich. It's not Alberto Cuebanam. So let's chop it up about Trautman and what he could be and why fans should not sleep on the addition of Adam Trautman.
You can't sleep on the addition of Adam Trautman because he's Sean Payton's guy. He's a player that Sean Payton drafted, and he made it clear when he met the media after the draft that he still believes in Adam Trautman. And now they were looking at tight ends, and I do wonder what the Broncos would have done if the run on tight ends had not happened before they picked. See, that was an interesting thing. You and I, we're both monitoring day two of the draft, and we both noticed the tight end run happening, and I think that probably changed the Broncos' plans. But at the same time, still needing a tight end, moving on to Adam Trautman, who's somebody he knows and somebody that Sean Payton believes still has upside in becoming an all-around tight end, and that's the key thing. What the Broncos had before Adam Trautman, they had two guys who were move tight ends in space, pass catchers, and they had one tight end and Chris Manhurts, who was a blocker, going to be in line. Nobody really projected as a potential all-around tight end, and even though Adam Trautman's pass-catching numbers haven't been great, if you can get a bit more out of him there, he can project as somebody who can be the dual threat that you can leave on the field and have out there for every down, every situation.
And I think it was at the Senior Bowl where he proved that he could play against better competition because his knocks out of Dayton were he can out-athlete guys at Dayton, which is fine. He ran a 4.8 40, so we're not talking about a blazing fast tight end, but we also are talking about a former quarterback who went to Dayton as a quarterback, converted to tight end, knows how to find soft spots in the zone. But I think it was the Senior Bowl where it first was shown, like, wait a second, he could block too. And then the Saints, listen, in 2020, he's not starting over Jared Cook. All right, that's just a given. Cook's a freak. Steve Spurrier said he compared him to Calvin Johnson, and was serious, by the way, because Jared Cook was a physical freak. So as a rookie, he wasn't going to start. And then it seemed like his development was stunted by the fact that Sean Payton took off, and he became such a good blocker. That's what they asked him to do.
Yeah, and the thing is, it was evident when they went into team period reps out there at Senior Bowl practice that he did have the goods in terms of being a blocking tight end. It was sort of a revelation, and he went from somebody who I think we were talking about saying, "All right, could he be the next FCS tight end to become a good pass catcher?" I think we were thinking of him in terms of maybe he could do the Dallas Goedert route, perhaps,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and. Yet you mentioned in the Saints they had Jared Cook. He wasn't going to get out there as a pass catcher, but he got out there as a blocker, and I think he got pigeonholed a little bit with New Orleans, and as time went on, became kind of disposable there with the Saints. I mean, they let him go basically for the cost of moving up
By the way, the pick
62
was A.T. Perry. So
picks.
I know D-Mac's
Yeah.
going to watch the Hendon Hooker pick, which was the Broncos pick to Detroit. The pick that the Saints got was A.T. Perry. There's a little sting to it. I like Adam Trautman. You like Adam Trautman. But A.T. Perry, whoo.
Yeah, I mean, with all respect to Adam Trautman, I think if you had told me that the Broncos were going to get a tight end by moving up a few picks to 63 and then get A.T. Perry there in round 6, I would have probably rather had that than the Mims-Trautman combination.
Especially without trading Jerry Jeudy,
yeah. Right, but it didn't work out that way. And again, it was the domino effect. I mean, with all respect to Adam Trautman, seems pretty obvious that he was a little bit of a plan B, and that plan A was tight end early at one of those two when the Broncos had 67, 68. One of those first 2 picks, I think plan A was the tight end. But then guys that we talked about, Schumacher, Luke Musgrave, they start falling off the board, and at that point the Broncos didn't feel good about what was left and then pivoted to Mims. But to their credit, they did manage to find somebody at tight end in Adam Trautman. But make no mistake, we always say focus on what they do, not what they say. All this is a function of clearly not being happy with what they have in the tight end room.
Right, which fans love Greg Dulcich. I'm not sure that the Broncos' new staff feels the same way. I wrote about it at denversports.com. Everybody check it out. Don't sleep on Adam Trautman. And if he could tap into that as a receiver. Now, Jules brings up a point here in the chat room, and I had thought about this. I considered it. I actually didn't put it in the article. It's probably an oversight on my part. I should have done that. Yeah. But Jules says, one thing I dislike is the Trautman trade is only 1 year of his contract left. In thinking about this as I'm writing and then not putting it in my article because that's me, Mace, I was like, actually, I like it because it's a contract year.
Yeah.
He's going to be motivated. And if there's someone, what's his career high in catches? Like 20, 25, whatever the number is. Like, if there's someone that could double that this year, if he gets a 50-catch guy, I'm not going to be surprised.
Yeah, and if he does that, then I think you're writing him the contract. Right, you're paying it. Maybe you're not willing to use the franchise tag if you can't get something done. But if he's playing well, you're drawing up a contract for him during the season, and maybe even right after the season. And that's the type of potential that he has. Now, you always have to be careful and wary of players who explode in their contract year. It's the one reservation I have about Zach Allen compared with Draymond Jones. Draymond Jones had been pretty good for multiple years, whereas Zach Allen really made a leap last year. So is that a leap of a contract year? Is it reflective of where he's going to go? We're fixing to find out, as Gary Kubiak would say. We're fixing to find out just what Adam Trautman has. But if you do give him a contract, you hope that he continues playing at the level and that's not just a deception of a contract. You remember, despite all this, all the growth that he's had and going back to the Senior Bowl and all that, still a player that coming from Dayton, which is non-scholarship FCS, that's different. That's a different level within a level than like North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Big Sky, etc. Okay, Adam Trautman is basically coming from a level that is relatively analogous to D2, maybe even high D3. So he had a huge leap. Now, he has started a bunch for New Orleans, but that leap would tell you it might take some time. It might be slow going. And if that's the case, the Broncos could be poised to capitalize on that. I mean,
and I know it's not the same for everybody, Mace. Kyle Pitts will spring to mind, right? But that's a top 10 pick. Tight end, I give him 3 years.
Yeah.
And with Trautman, with Payton leaving, like this is almost Trautman's third year in my eyes, just as an analyst thinking, like, what's left with Adam Trautman? I don't think we've seen his best football, so I'm anxious to see that.
I am too. And I mean, I'm not sure we put him in Sharpie as starter just yet, but
what would change that? Do you think?
I think
what would change? I mean, that would be Okwuegbunam developing as a blocker, or Dulcich growing as a blocker, or Manhurst growing as a pass catcher. So
I'd say it's more Dulcich growing as a blocker, or if Albert O flashes as a pass catcher, and you just say, all right, he can be our Jared Cook, our Jimmy Graham, and we'll live with the blocking deficiency. Okay, that's the variable in there. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Dulcich or Albert O end up starting, but the path is Dulcich becomes that all-around player as a blocker. The first thing is he's got to stay healthy. And even though he played in 10 games last year, the time that he missed in OTAs and in training camp because of all the hamstring issues with which he dealt, that was incredibly costly to him as a rookie because you knew he could run routes. You knew he could get separation. You knew he could catch the football. What you didn't know was whether he could block, and we still don't know that. You and I, and body type conversation comes into play as well. You have your comments that you've always said since seeing Dulcich in the locker room at the clean-out day back in January. So there's a question in terms of body type as to whether he can become an effective inline blocker. But that's what he needs to do to establish himself as a starter. Albert O, it would be a matter of being so overwhelming as a pass catcher that you just have to get him on the field. You need that threat. That happens, Cecil. I think he actually ends up taking time from one of the receivers, which goes back to the conversation of how would it all shock me if one of the receivers were traded before the cut down date at the end of the summer? No, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
No surprises there. I guess a small surprise, super quick, Mace, I guess. It's Friday, so we can whatever.
Yeah.
I was writing up Will Mallory today, and I always write up film, and I watch film, and I don't necessarily pay attention to, like, the family connection. His dad coached for Sean Payton.
Yeah.
And he was there coaching Jimmy Graham. So I was like, I guess they must not like Will Mallory. I like Will Mallory. I do. So if we're talking like late round tight ends or whatever, I was like, hey, Will Mallory. And they must, I mean, with that sort of connection, obvious connection, like, okay, maybe, they just felt Trautman was better.
Yeah. Well, for Sean Payton, Adam Trautman is somebody he knows. I mean, with all respect to familial connections, if the coach says, hey, I believe in this guy, that's it. It's Sean Payton's show. There was actually something interesting today in The Athletic in regards to that. Mike Sando always does a post-draft piece where he talks to executives, and they're always unnamed executives, scouts, and all that, about a team's draft. And one exec said, quote, of the Broncos, quote, everything they do now feels coach driven, unquote. And that was in specifically in regard to moving the draft, moving down the draft to get Adam Trautman, and then moving up to get Riley Moss. Another exec whose team was picking late in the third round referred to the trade up for Riley Moss as a quote holy bleep moment in their draft room when the Broncos did it. But it's all about what Sean Payton wants. It's all about his vision. But as another unnamed executive said in this story, Cecil, quote, Sean Payton's MO has always been to trade future picks for now currency. The difference is when he was in New Orleans, he had Drew Brees, It will be interesting to see how it goes in Denver, unquote.
Yeah, I believe we're looking at two major differences, and no one will be surprised that it's Russell Wilson instead of Drew Brees, and it's George Payton instead of Mickey Loomis. Now, our discussion, Mace, becomes which gap is smaller? The gap between Mickey Loomis and George Payton, which might be where my vote is, or Drew Brees, even advanced age Drew Brees, and where Russell Wilson's at now. That one, the gap is a little fuzzier because we don't know yet how Russell Wilson's going to look.
Yeah, we don't know the gap on that. And I think we've actually got to see Russell Wilson playing for Sean Payton before we can ascertain the gap. Because we have to find out how much of last year was on Nathaniel Hackett and how much of it was Russell Wilson in decline. If Wilson bounces back and is playing at his Seattle level, is that Drew Brees level? No, but it's a half step below. You can work with that and you can win with that. So that's something we're going to have a better answer on if we're having this conversation even 6 months from now, which is going to be roughly at midseason. We'll be able to better ascertain that. As for George Payton and Mickey Loomis, I think they're both good general managers, but they have very different philosophies. And um, I think we'll see how that ends up playing out over time. I'd say this for Peyton. I think he's a better drafter than he is a trader in terms of trading for veteran players. But but we'll see if he is okay. Look, if George Payton is okay executing what Sean Payton's vision is, George Payton might be there a long time. He might
Yeah.
be there as long as Sean Payton is.
Yeah.
And like we've talked about, the two of them are grinders, and that and George Payton, for all that some Broncos fans might have in terms of consternation with him, is very well respected in football circles, and I think Sean Payton respects George Payton as well, and that's why here we are sitting after the draft, and it looks like the two of them are good to go for another year round cycle.
Respect to the grind. Hashtag rise and grind. And I can see the Spider-Man meme now where Sean Payton is there for like a 1 a.m. meeting or just 1 a.m. film mashing. And then George Payton's there and they're pointing at each other.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I love it.
Someone's got to tell Stokely late at night.
Because Stokely's always talking about grinders. And then he's like, hashtag grinder. I was like, Stoke, you don't, no. Nobody. Like you got to know what that is, Brandon Stokely. Anyway,
well,
orange and blue.
Okay, it's all about the spelling, though, right?
I suppose.
Yes. If you take out a vowel, grinder means something different.
Yes, it does. Brandon Stokely, be careful, my friend.
Yes. That's all good. It's all good either way,
Yeah, that's all love. That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Orange and blue today. This show could get a little crazy sometimes. It's presented by Champ Honda. We appreciate everyone for watching. Remaining holes for this team, off the top of your head, I'm still thinking edge. Like, okay, I'd like some more edge. I think they have enough wide receivers, everybody. There's a lot of fans that say running back. But what are the remaining holes for you, Mace?
Well, running back is interesting because I think they want to see just where Javonte Williams is and start projecting where he can go. And also, they want to see how Samaje Perine fits. And they want to get a look at these two undrafted running backs and see what kind of spark they have as well. So I think running back is one of those things where, as we learned last year, you could get Latavius Murray there at midseason. You can find somebody if you need that. So that's not something I regard as a huge hole right now. I'd say edge. I would also say interior offensive line, particularly center. How good do you feel about Lloyd Cushenberry? Don't sleep on Kyle Fuller, who started 8 games with Russell Wilson at center in Seattle in 2020 and 2021. So don't sleep on him being part of that. But I don't think the Broncos see that as a huge need right now. The one thing is edge. I mean, that's what jumps out to me. But at the same time, basically, this is going to be the group that you ride with, and they want to get some questions answered. They want to see if their new strength, nutrition, training protocol helps Randy Gregory actually stay healthy. They want to see if Baron Browning can take those natural gifts and really be consistent. Because if you can keep Gregory healthy and you can channel Baron Browning's skill set, and then you have a dash of Drew Sanders thrown in there, you might not have your Von Miller type of alpha dog there, as Jose refers to, but you're in okay shape. I also think they're okay at defensive line as well. Maybe you could add one more person. I know some Broncos fans may think Shelby Harris, but remember, D line is one of the two position groups where you brought back your position coach. So there's a area where you're not starting at zero, and they really like the outlook long term for Matt Henningsen and Eni Awazarike, for one to be at least a rotational player and the other to perhaps be a starter. I mean, internally there were a lot of raves about Matt Henningsen last year, the 6th-round pick out of Wisconsin, and so don't be surprised to see him push his way into more playing time. And the same goes for Eni Awazarike, who played a lot more down the stretch last year.
I did tweet earlier, and Tom brings it up in the chat room. Chase Roullier is going to be a June 1 cut. Nikki Javala, our dear friend, Washington Post, had that today. And I was like, okay, he's only played 10 games over the last 2 years, but if he's healthy, I'm Sean Payton, I'm giving him a call.
Sure. I don't see why you wouldn't. Get him in there, of course, from the University of Wyoming. So bring him back to his home territory.
Some sneaky and stinky
Steamy.
Good players. Because remember, you had Tanner Gentry.
Yeah.
You had, who was the running back? Allen. You had Josh Allen at quarterback. You had Brian, what the hell was the running back's name? That played for Atlanta Falcons. Like, he was good. You had Chase Roullier. Like, Wyoming, they didn't have much, but they did have like 4 or maybe even 5 pros there, even though Gentry's been like a practice squad guy. But yeah, so like Josh Allen's team, there was a couple guys, a couple names to know, and Chase certainly a player that I think a lot of Broncos fans, the price would be right. He's only played 10 games over the last 2 years, so and I think was hurt last year in week 2, so he's had plenty of time to recover.
Brian Hill.
Yes, thank you, Brian Hill.
5th-round pick in 2017, 1 year before Josh Allen was in the draft. That was the same draft as Roullier, of course, who can step in and play center. He'd be an interesting player to look at. And then I think wasn't Andrew Wingard there about the same time as well?
Yes.
Maybe he was a little bit behind. He
was a little bit behind him, because I was at Wingard's pro day because. Oh, boy, they've had a couple of linebackers. Andrew Wingard came back for Luke Wilson's pro day. So I was at Wingard's pro day. And then the next year, here comes Wingard as a Jacksonville Jaguar to support Luke Wilson. And then the next year, it was Chad Muma. And guess who came back? Wingard and Wilson to watch Muma's pro day. So it's kind of a cool little family up there in Laramie. And
of course, then there was a guy the Broncos had 1 year in their camp. Remember Eddie Yarbrough? And he actually ended up playing. Yeah. He actually ended up playing 4 or 5 years in the league, as it turned out, for Buffalo and Minnesota mostly. So, yeah, there were some dudes coming out of Laramie for a while there.
Wingard was at the local pro day for the Broncos.
I think so, yeah.
Because I remember, and I'll tell you off air who it was, but as I was going into that local pro day, one of our lovely Broncos reporters said, "We're about ready to see a bunch of blanket nobodies today." And I said, no.
I hate that.
I hate that too, because you're trying to make it, dude. This is life. This is football. You got to grind your ass off. You got to work your ass off for a local tryout. And yeah, the odds are stacked against you, but you're there to put in work, man. And I think us as, regular media types, like, we just need to know that talent can come from anywhere. So when Andrew Wingard makes it out of that local pro day group, I'm just like shaking my head, man.
Hey, I always say that even the 90th player on the roster in training camp who gets signed because of an injury and doesn't end up sticking, but yet I always say you walk on that field for a practice and you've accomplished something great, right? Just being there. I mean, we all have a habit of saying, okay, this guy's useless, blah, 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 once you get to the regular season. But sometimes I think we need to step back and reflect upon the fact that you accomplished something just by being on a roster at some point. And oh, by the way, we see so many of these players come from off the radar and make it. And I just that's why when we talk about these undrafted players, we talk about these XFL guys. I wrote about the 3 XFL pickups at denversports.com this morning. You know what? I think there's a easy temptation to just be a chucklehead about it, but hey, some of these guys end up making it, man.
Yeah.
Just you know, just let the game happen. Let the player let the player get out there and take a shot. You know.
Yep. And how many
What's the harm?
first rounders are going to bust? You know what
Yeah,
I mean? How many of these undrafted guys are going to make it? It's the game, man. It's so beautiful about this game. It's like you can be Chris Harris. Now, Chris Harris and Patrick Peterson's numbers are almost identical, and Peterson's made like 30 million more because one's a top 10 pick and one's an undrafted guy. But Chris Harris is a special player.
He's going to be in the Ring of Fame. I mean, we're going to be talking about him the way we talk about Rod Smith or in Broncos history, right?
Will it say no-fly zone
was undrafted.
and all their names, or will it say each one of their names individually?
Okay,
I'm for putting in the no-fly zone as one.
Okay, but here's, of course, the thing there is T.J. Ward did not make it to the 4-year standard of the Ring of Fame because he got cut before the 2017 season.
The Ring of Fame's got some politics anyway, because correct me if I'm wrong, Ed's still not in, right?
Ed McCaffrey's not in. Steve Foley's not in. Riley Odoms is not in.
Yeah,
Juwan
so
Jones is
I don't
not
want to
in.
hear about the Ring of Fame selection. Like, you're already missing out on a bunch of really good Broncos.
We should probably do a Ring of Fame show early next week and chop that up because I have some strong opinions on that. And one of my strong opinions is, first, with all respect to Ed McCaffrey, I think you've got to start by relieving the backlog, and you've got to start with the older guys.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, for sure.
To me, the Ring of Fame, if you're starting to get rid of that backlog, the 2 players you should start with right away are Riley Odoms and Steve Foley.
When you said Steve Foley wasn't in, I was perplexed. I was like, what?
It blows my mind. Nobody in Broncos history has more interceptions than Steve Foley. He's not in the Ring of Fame. Riley Odoms was an all-pro tight end in the 70s. Played 12 seasons. Mm-hmm. He was a part of John Ralston's first draft class, and he did not disappoint. So how he's not in, how Steve Foley isn't in, blows my mind. Look, okay, they're not Pro Football Hall of Famers. That's fine. It's the Ring of Fame. It's a different standard. And then a guy who gets no traction, but to me should be in the conversation, is Rulon Jones, who was an All-Pro back in the 80s. It came up when I was on the drive earlier this week about, should Derek Wolfe be in the Hall of Fame? Or the Ring of Fame, pardon me. And what I said was, I'm in favor of doing it like Kansas City does, where you induct somebody every year come hell or high water. Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And if that's the case, eventually I think you'll get Derek Wolfe in. But with all respect to Derek Wolfe, Rulon Jones needs to be in first. Rulon Jones was a terror, an all-pro, and had double-digit sacks from interior defensive line position multiple times. Sometimes guys just get forgotten and kind of get lost in history a little bit. I think Rulon Jones is a guy that needs to be brought back to the fore. And I look at it, and I look up at the Ring of Fame, and to me, that's a guy who should be in there whose name is sadly missing.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the days of Rulon and Greg Cragen, right?
Yeah,
75 to 71.
Cragen came around at the end, toward the end for Rulon Jones, because Rulon Jones got there like in 1980. So he actually rotates in and is kind of he's part of the defense when you're still calling it the orange crushing. You've still got, Randy Gradishar, Tom Jackson,
yeah.
Reuben Carter, Barney Chavis. They're still in the mix when Rulon gets there. He makes an impact right away as an interior pass rusher. And then throughout as guys start falling off because you start losing those orange crush dudes to retirement. And Rulon Jones is one of the people who kind of held up the defense, kept the defense that flag flying throughout the mid to late 1980s before injuries caught up with him. And it's just, I feel like he's been kind of sadly overlooked over the years. But if you go back and I mean, I don't mean to make kind of the numbers argument strictly, but if you go back and look at Rulon Jones's career, all right, interior defensive line, it's hard to get sacks. 4 seasons of double-digit sacks, including like Pro Football Reference has gone back, and even though the sack wasn't official until AE2, they've gone back and calculated it for before that. So 1980, rookie, 11 and a half sacks. He has 3 straight years of double-digit sacks in the mid-80s, 84, 85, 86. One of those years he's an All-Pro. He's a Pro Bowl. He's a Pro Bowler twice in that span. 73 and a half sacks in 9 seasons. Again, interior defensive lineman. When you do that, that is tough to pull off. Okay, that's a huge prodigious
Think about him
number
doing
for
that
interior
today.
line. Oh,
people are talking about him nonstop.
Right. If Rulon Jones plays today, he's a 20 to $22 million a year player as an interior defensive lineman putting up that kind of production. Okay, so I mean that dude could play, and somehow the guy's gotten forgotten. And I'm saying no. We gotta bring Rulon Jones and those flowing blonde locks back to the front table and talk about him being a guy who needs to be in the Ring of Fame.
That's right. Orange or blue today on a mess around Friday. He is Andrew Mason. I am Cecil Lammey. Mace, you got any plans for a Cinco de Mayo? A safe and happy Cinco de Mayo, by the way.
We had our Cinco de Mayo deal on Wednesday, Tres de Mayo. So yeah, not really.
Okay.
But it was great. I mean, I had a burrito for lunch that day, and then we had shrimp tacos for dinner. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know?
I can send you the recipe too. I made walking taco. I don't know if you've ever had a walking taco. You can make it in a crock pot.
Yeah.
But yes, and I told my mother-in-law, I was like, I'm Mexican. I'm going to eat tacos. You're going to eat a bunch of tacos if you come over to my house. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good for you if you're trying to watch the carbs, but man, give me all the tortillas. Give me all the tortillas. Are you a flour or corn tortilla?
I'm a corn guy. Yeah,
I'm a flour guy. I just like the flexibility of flour. I feel like corn tortillas are a little too stiff for me.
Nuke them. Put them in the microwave about a minute.
Okay.
And
I knew flour tortillas already. Okay, all right. I'll try.
You need
I'll try
to make
that
flour
next time.
tortillas. Now you're making me hungry. Flour tortillas in a pan with some butter, each side.
Yes.
Beautiful, wonderful,
Yeah.
and also they're a mariachi band. And I wore their shirt today, and I'll just show this off. It's Brown Sabbath. They do
nice.
Black Sabbath songs, but mariachi style.
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical.
Yeah, so go on YouTube, look up Brown Sabbath.
Yeah.
And so I'll listen to some Brown Sabbath and maybe some Los Tucanes today. So
Okay.
a little ranchero music, it's fine. A little rigatone, some Bad Bunny. You never know. It's Andrew Mason, Cecil Lammey.
I'm hungry now, though.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, those flour tortillas with the butter. Let me finish. Okay. Let my pants fit. Anyway, he's Andrew Mason. I'm Cecil Lammey. We appreciate you all. We'll talk schedule surprises. We'll talk more of that stuff later. We got plenty to talk about.
We got 4 days to dive into the schedule next week, and so we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yep. We will get there as always. Have a safe and happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone. He's Mace. I'm Cease. We're OBT. It's a BFD. Do you those YouTube things? Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Please watch all the way to the end. It really, really helps the algorithm and puts us in front of more people. So please help out our YouTube channel by doing just that. Andrew Mason can be followed on Twitter. He is at Mace Denver. I am at Cecil Lammey, saying we thank you much. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you're appreciated. Stay tuned, and please stay frosty.